Oh, thank you all for coming here. I say thank you at the beginning in case my speech bombs out. I do want to thank AMC for making this possible, as well as to thank LL Bean. Really appreciate the opportunity to come here and speak with you tonight. I've done a couple of talks at AMC meetings. It's always great, really beautiful people there. I'm an AMC member myself for a very long time. So I really appreciate the opportunity to come here and talk to you tonight about my topic, Trail Talk from an Old Dirt Kicker. I just want to make it clear that I'm not the one that's old. It's the dirt that's old. I kick old dirt. Just saying. So now, I've been kicking this old dirt for a very long time. And during that time, a lot of people have been curious about what it's like to be a wilderness trekker, wilderness backpacker, and so forth. And so what I'm going to do tonight is I've taken the 10 issues or questions that people are most curious about when it comes to wilderness travel. And for each of the 10, I'm going to say a few words about it by taking you on a trip that I actually did somewhere in the world at some point in time where that question or that issue was relevant. And I'll speak to you in terms of an actual trip that I've taken. When I finish those 10 things, I'm going to kind of summarize it by giving you 5 quick things that I've learned over all the years that I've been doing this. And while I'm taking you through some of these trips, I may be quoting from time to time from my book, wherever it's relevant to the issue or the question that I'm talking about. And then after that, if there are any questions, I'll be happy to do a Q&A after that, okay? So let's lace them up and get on the trail. The first thing, number 10, people ask me, like, why do you do this? Especially I live in New York City, and it comes out a little differently. It mostly comes out like, what are you, crazy? What's wrong? You sleep on the ground? Carry a pack? What's up with that? Why do you do it? Why do you spend all the time out there? Well, there are a lot of reasons that I do it. I like the adventure. I like the excitement. I like being in a different environment than what I'm used to. But the main reason that I do it, the thing that I like most is I'm a very curious person. I'm a curious person about everything, especially in the natural world. And experience being the best teacher, I found that the best way to satisfy my curiosity is to go out there and experience it for myself. And so I'm going to take you now to Peru, back in 2012, to Ausangate, the sacred mountain, and talk about curiosity. What I'm specifically curious about, more than anything else, is I'm curious about people who live in really remote places. And so what I do is I combine my love of backpacking and my interest in people, and I go there as kind of an ethnographer, and I just kind of hang out with people and find out what it is that they do and how they live. So in 2012, I went down to Peru. Now, when people think about Peru, they mostly think about like Machu Picchu, the Incas there. I wasn't that interested in like old deserted buildings. I was more interested in the descendants of the Incas, who I was told if you went back far enough into the Andes Mountains, you could still find people who were living the way they were living hundreds of years ago. That's all I needed, so I had to go. So I first went down to Cusco, mostly to acclimatize. Cusco's at about, 13,000, something like that. I stayed there 5 days, and while I was there, they had this parade one Sunday where people from nearby communities would come in, and they would dress in their traditional clothing. Every little community had their own styles, their own colors. They actually had their own, even musicians. They had their little dance steps that they did. It was a very nice little parade there, but it was mostly like a hangout, which was really nice. The parade wasn't very long. It was mostly about interacting with other people. And so the couple of days that I spent there, the 4 or 5 days that I was there, it was a good introduction to what I was going to be seeing and what I was hoping to find and what I was looking for. After that, I got on a bus, rode up in the mountains for how many hours, I don't even know, all day long. And then I began to walk from there. This mountain in the back is called Ausangate. It's one of the sacred mountains of the Inca people who still live there. It's about 20,000 feet. It's one of a very, very tall mountain. My campsite here is about 14,000. And right here by the stream, which 10 minutes earlier was part of that glacier, so it was very cold. And what I was told is that if you walk around the back of this mountain, you will see people living in this very old way. It's very ancient, traditional way that they've all been living. To walk around, it's about 50 miles. And so I got here, and I began to walk. And sure enough, I began to see people. This woman here was actually herding a bunch of llamas. And she's carrying her baby on her back. She wasn't really crazy about being photographed, but she said, when I'm going away, you can take my back. I can speak a little Spanish, although most of the people here don't even speak Spanish. They still speak in Quechua, the original language here. This is one of the places that I visited, one of the little communities here. Finding something out about people. So most of the trips that I do have some kind of educational or some kind of purpose where I'm trying to learn things or just basically satisfy my curiosity. So that's why I do it. Then they say on number 9, skills. Like, what kind of skills do you need? I mean, what's the story? What do you have to learn? What do you have to deal with in order to travel in the wilderness? My thing with skills is, if you're going to be in a different environment, or an environment that's different from the one you live in, you're probably going to have to learn a whole different skill set. And in this case, it was certainly true. In 2008 here, I went to Gros National Park up in Newfoundland. And this park here, I don't know if anybody's ever been there. So my French is not all that great, but I know Gros means big, and I know Morne means dismal, dreary, lousy, whatever. So the big, lousy, dreary national park. Like, who wants to go there, right? So I want to read to you what their brochure said back in 2008 for this national park. And for the long-range mountains, which is the classic feature in this national park. This is what it says. The long-range mountains provide hikers with some of the most scenic and challenging hiking terrain in eastern North America. Hiking in the long-range mountains is physically and mentally challenging. It is remote, strenuous, and potentially hazardous. There are no built trails on the long range, although there are a number of suggested backcountry routes. These routes are not marked with signs or maintained in any manner. Hikers need backcountry travel experience, be self-reliant, and proficient using maps and compass to navigate unfamiliar wilderness terrain. Now, who would, in their right mind, would want to go there and see a place like this? Besides me and a couple of other hardy souls here that went there. So I picked this place to talk about skills because of all the trips I ever did, this was the only trip I ever took where you had to take a test to see if you were good at navigation before they would give you a wilderness permit. Okay? So whether you were carrying GPS or not, I wasn't carrying one, you had to be proficient with a map and a compass, and they would test you on it. Back then, the wilderness permit cost 125 Canadian dollars. And they made you buy the permit before you took the test. And if you didn't pass the test, you didn't get your money back. So you had to know what you were doing. So honestly, I had no problem with the test. These are basic wilderness skills. I'm sure that some of you have seen this listing before. When I look at this list, two things occur to me. Number one is that some of the skills that you would need are skills that you would probably use on a daily basis, or at least on a very regular basis. Map and compass navigation, maybe fire starting, weather prediction, so forth and so on. Other items on this list are items that you may not have to use very often, you may not ever have to use them, but if you had to use them, you better have the skill. So when I look at skill sets, what comes to mind is if you have the skills, you also have confidence. And the confidence is really what's going to get you to pull through here. Again, some of the stuff like first aid or building emergency shelter, you hope that you never have to do it, but if you have to do it, then at least you know how to do it and you can go. So, back to Newfoundland, and the reason why it's very hard to navigate here in this park is because this vegetation here, they call it tuckamore, is very, very dense. And there's a lot of it. And you can go in heading in the northern direction, but by the time you come out on the other side, you don't know if you're heading east, south, or what. And so they want to make sure that you know what you're doing there. So I went through here, and then once you get out of it, and you get above the tree line, then you can kind of walk up here. I walked up here to the top of this mountain, and here I am on the summit. Gros Morne, taking kind of old school selfie. I was by myself. You put your camera on the ground and set the lapse timer, hit the button, jump in front, strike the macho pose. There you go. But 10 minutes later, after this, I dropped my compass and it broke. And suddenly I wasn't smiling anymore. There was no way I could finish the hike. There was just no way I could do it without a compass. In fact, turning around and going back was going to be tough as well because it was just so tricky and so hard to push through this tuckamore. So, looking back, I noticed that, here's all the tuckamore here, it's all this undergrowth. This lake back here, going east and west, I figured if I can make it through all this and get to this lake, and then go in that direction, go right in the lake, which is west, that in a couple of days, I would get to the coast. And that the coast would be reasonably close to where I started. That was the best shot I had. That was the best I could do. And so that was it. I managed to do it. It took me another 4 days to get back. It was an absolutely terrible trip. The biting bugs, the heat, and just really not actually knowing exactly where you were at any one time was really tough. But in the end, I made it to the coast, and this is, again, basically fairly close to where I started out. Of course, now, my car is at the trailhead about 50 miles away, and I had to figure out how to get there, but at least I was able to get out. So the moral of the story for me is, again, if you have the skills that are necessary, you can go in confidence, and so that even if something happens, you can make the adjustment, and you can do what you have to do in order to be safe and get yourself out of there. So that brings us to number 8 is planning. Planning to me is one of the most important things you can do. It's almost as important as doing the actual hike itself, because planning really determines the extent to which your trip is going to be successful. Most of the time when something bad happens on a trip, it's usually can be traced back to poor planning. Something that you didn't anticipate, something that you planned for in the wrong way, something that you just didn't get it right. And so you really have to be sure that any trip you go on, any place you go, that the planning has to be right on point. Now, whenever I really think of planning, like everybody else, I think about Benjamin Franklin, right? No, Benjamin Franklin. So, Benjamin Franklin was a cool dude. Benjamin Franklin, not only was, if you ever know his life, a really interesting guy, but he had a knack for saying things without wasting a whole lot of words. Like he cut to the chase, right? So Franklin says, well done is better than well said. I can relate to that. You know, he says, time waits for no one. Said that like way before the Rolling Stones said that. But what he also said is, failing to plan is like planning to fail. And so I don't know if this guy Franklin ever went on a wilderness trip, but if he did, he probably would be able to come out okay and do well. Now, planning, everybody has their own kind of way of planning what they're going to take and what they're going to do on a trip. What I do is I have 4 categories. I have food, clothing, gear, and what I'm going to call logistics. And so what I do is I lay out my food, I lay out my clothing, and I lay out my gear. And then in each of these 3 categories, I decide what I'm going to take and what I'm going to leave behind. And it all has to go, of course, in this pack right here. And then the 4th part of the trip is the actual logistics. In this particular case, in the gates of the Arctic, back in 1986, this is before GPS, before internet, everything else, I was up there for 23 days. It was 10 days of hiking until I got to a lake that was near a river, John River, at which point I arranged to have a bush pilot fly in and land on that lake and leave me a canoe and some more supplies. And then I took the canoe down for another 10 days or so. It's about 125, 130 miles altogether on this trip. I went with a friend of mine here. And what I'd like to do is just read to you how we planned this trip. Again, remembering that this is before GPS, before the internet. You had a sense now, man. Well, I'll just read it to you. If we were doing this trip accompanied by a local outfitter with experience in that environment, all of the planning would be taken care of. We'd be given a list of what to bring, advice on what to expect, and we would not have to deal with the complex logistics. Doing it independently meant assuming the risks, which emphasized the importance of careful, detailed preparation. Our planning began more than 6 months before the departure date. In that largely pre-internet era, we typed and sent snail mail letters to the National Park Service and to anyone else who might have any information about northern Alaska. There were books to read about the Arctic and the Brooks Range. There were indigenous people to learn about as well. The Nunavut, or Inupiat Eskimos in the northern part of the Brooks Range, and the Athabascan Indians who inhabited the southern regions. We researched and charted weather trends, made estimates of time and daily travel distances, got information on airline schedules, lodging, charter flights, canoe rentals, made lists of food and gear requirements, evaluated warmth to weight ratios in different articles of clothing, and we estimated budgets. We learned the area's flora and fauna, including how to travel safely in grizzly country. I ordered topographic maps from the U.S. Geological Survey and waited patiently for them to arrive by mail. Now you hit a couple of buttons on the internet, it downloads them right there. How cool is that? We purchased a lightweight 12-gauge shotgun and went to a gun club every week to learn gun safety and practice shooting. Bear spray, a must-have today for safe travel in grizzly country, was not available back then. Also not available were bear-proof food containers or cell phones. Once we left our point of departure, we would have no method of communication and would be totally out of touch with the rest of the world. Our plane took nothing for granted. In January of 1986, 6 months before we departed, the malfunction of a simple O-ring destroyed the Space Shuttle Challenger. And just 3 months later, a mishandled safety test resulted in a nuclear power plant disaster at Chernobyl. The impact of these tragic events was not lost on us. That's kind of planning we had to do. So, let's see what happened. This is part of the lighting's not this great here, but the This is part of the first 10 days of hiking across the tundra. We flew into Bettles, Alaska, above the Arctic Circle. You'll see a piece of paper with my name, the date, and the mountain, the name that I named the mountain, and I put it up under there. So if you get up there, it's like there are other mountains here. I don't know if that's still, I don't know if that still tradition still works, but again, it's all about planning. It really is. On this particular trip, everything went exactly the way we planned it, and so it just proves again that if you prepare well and you plan well, your likelihood of doing a trip where nothing goes wrong is pretty good. So that brings us now to fitness. And for this, we're going to go to Norway, 2014. Fitness, is pretty easy. People say, well, what kind of fitness do you have to be? Especially an old fart like you. What kind of, come on, man. So, but you have to be fit. And my thing about fitness is, the best reason to be fit is that if you go and you're fit, you're going to have more fun. And if you're not fit, you're not going to have as much fun. And if you're not going to have fun, what's the point of going? So here in 2014, I went to Jotunheimen because this was kind of a tough hike here. I'll show you what I mean. This is where it all starts. And so over here, you can barely see the road coming in from Oslo, swings around here. This is where the road ends. And the thing is that once you get off the bus, you start climbing right away. I was in the bus when it was parking, I was looking, I was like, oh man. You'd like to have that first day kind of easy, you ease away, looking at them, going, oh wow. So this is about 1,000 feet up. Right off the bat, and then you keep on walking, it just keeps going higher and higher. This is now about 2,000 feet above this long lake here. And what I was doing, why I was here, where I was going, was here. I wanted to climb this mountain. This is above the tree line now, on the final approach. This mountain is called Auyuittuq. This is the second highest mountain in Norway, a little bit over 8,000 feet. And this mountain here used to be the highest mountain in Norway. But it was covered with a big snowfield back in the day, and they measured the height of the mountain from the top of the snowfield. Then over time, the snow started to melt. It got down until the next highest mountain, which had no snow, was actually taller. So this mountain is now the second tallest mountain in Norway. The tallest mountain in Norway is only about 12 feet high. So I wanted to climb here. So it took me about 4 or 5 days to get here. I made a camp down right about where this photo was taken to do the final climb as a day hike. This is getting close to the top now, and still have some snow up here, but not that much. And this is the final approach. This is looking back down where I had my camp down here in this little valley down here. And then finally, I make it up to the top. I do another selfie thing, and I could have picked any trip to talk about fitness because fitness is relevant on any trip that you take. But I did it for this trip because it was a kind of a rigorous trip, and it was about 2 or 3 weeks after I turned 70, and I went on this trip by myself. So I was happy that I was able to do this, and I did have fun. 6 is attitude. Well, here's the thing about attitude. You got to keep a good attitude. You got that figured out, right? Everything is good until it goes bad. And when it goes bad in the wilderness, it can go really, really bad. Right? In the rush, if you will, to learn all the skills that are necessary, a lot of people don't take attitude and the importance of keeping a good attitude, they don't keep it in mind. They kind of overlook it. But it's really critical to be able to do that. because when things go wrong, that's what's going to really get you out there. You know, people say only the strong survive. That's not true. The ones who are going to survive are the ones who are able to keep it together and to stay positive and to just do what they have to do, and just be aware and be sure that in the end everything is going to work out. And no less an explorer than Ernest Shackleton, you know, the guy who went to Antarctica. He had 5 things that he said were important for traveling the world. So I'm just going to grab it here so I don't. And so his 5 things were number 5 was courage. You think courage of being close to the top. That was his 5th one. 4th was idealism, to believe in what you're doing. The 3rd one was physical endurance. That's only 3rd, physical endurance. The 2nd most important one was patience. And his most important, most critical, essential quality for wilderness travel, his number 1 was optimism. And so, yeah, you have to keep it together sometimes. And back here in Australia, in 1997, I was walking in the Great Dividing Range, the mountain range in Australia, with 2 friends of mine, and it got really, really bad out there. This was, what we did was we got to the closest town, and we hired somebody in a car. He drove us 30 miles on this rough dirt road into the mountains, dropped us off, and then we started hiking from there. We were going to make a camp that first night because there was a perennial stream there, and we were just going to get set up and then start out the next day. We get dropped off, the guy takes off, and we walk to the campsite. It wasn't really a campsite, it was just open camping, and all the water was gone. It was dry, there was a drought, it was extremely hot. So right off the bat, we were in real trouble. And it only got worse from there. Here's a shot of what these mountains look like. They're very, very steep. The trails are existent in some places, but in other places it's not. It was about 110 degrees every day. And every day was a struggle to find water. I had never been in a situation where I had to really hope that some kind of water would happen. We had to make the distance every day, and then we finally walked as far as we could walk. We then had to split up and then look for water. And some of the filthy, disgusting water we drank on this trip was, it's just hard to believe. But here's the thing. So we realized that we were in trouble. And we sat down and we said, hey, listen, the only way we're going to get out of here is we have to keep a positive attitude. We have to keep it together. And so we talked about it. And what we decided, what we agreed on, was that none of us was going to be the first one to complain. That no matter what happened, you know, it's like, it's not going to be me. I don't know what happened. Maybe you 2 guys. No, it's not going to be me either. That really helped. But it was really an ordeal. Here I am looking at a map. There was supposed to be these perennial streams up there, and they were all dry. And to find water dripping, 1 drop at a time, you put a pot there and you wait, you know, for 45 minutes to get just a little bit of water. Now, understand, without water, not only did we have nothing to drink, we had nothing to eat because we were eating freeze-dried food and we needed the water to reconstitute the food. And then it went from bad to worse. We started getting signs of heat sickness. Tongue started to swell. There was absolutely no moisture there. Wicked headaches, dizziness, all these signs of heat stroke. But we were still determined to keep it together. We got to this old shack here, and there was supposed to be a stream right here, a big wide stream. maybe someday there was a stream there. There was nothing there. I can see why this guy gave it up and said, I'm moving back to Sydney or whatever. But in the end, the three of us made it. We had to abandon the route. We had to go down, lose some altitude, get down the valley, try to find some water. It was a long, nasty, horrible trip. Sometimes you get those trips. But we're still smiling, we're still alive, we're still friends. This is only a few minutes after we each drank about 10 gallons of water. So I was never so happy to be able to urinate. I shouldn't really say that. You know what I'm saying? This is all I was very upset. Man, that was cool. So yeah, you know, you have to really just learn to keep it together. Which brings us now to number 5, weather. So here we're going to go to Iceland. But before I go to Iceland, I want to mention that about, maybe 25 years ago, I was hiking on the Canol Divide Trail, and I hit the tree line. I was going up and over a pass, and there was a sign next to the trail, and the headline of the sign said, "Nature doesn't care." And it went on to say that if the weather is bad, if you're reading the sign, don't go any farther than this because there's whiteout conditions and all kinds of bad things can happen, and weather doesn't care. So that got me to think about how true that is, that it doesn't matter that you have to be someplace on a certain date. It doesn't matter that when you get back home, you're a really important person. It doesn't matter. Any of that doesn't matter because nature doesn't care, especially weather. You know, and it's just something that I always remembered. And I remembered it when I got to Iceland, when there's a glacier on top of an active volcano. And then the volcano erupts and a million gazillion tons of ice suddenly melts. I didn't want it to happen while I was there, but I knew that it had happened in the past, and I wanted to go and see what that was like. And so here was a place here. This glacier is on top of an active volcano, and this is the ice melting in a cone underneath it. And actually, this water coming down here is the beginning of a river in Iceland. So this on a smaller scale is what can happen when that intense heat from within a volcano heats up the ice that's sitting on the top. Here's an example here of when it happened. I think it was back in the 1930s when it happened, a cataclysmic explosion and all the ice melted. This right here going across is about 4 miles. And going this way, lengthwise, maybe 25, 30 miles. This is where the ice melted and all the water flowed back to the ocean. Everything here for 20 miles, 4 miles across is gone. And it never grew back. I mean, so you can imagine the devastation when this happened. So, you know, yeah, I was happy to see that, but then the weather turned bad. You know, so we're all used to weather, you know, for first day, yeah, okay, no problem, a little bit of snow. It is Iceland, right? Then, you know, a little bit more snow. And then it just kept getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And then after that, after about 3 days of snow, this incredibly rough, wicked storm hit. Now, I've been doing this for a very, very long time, all over the world. This is the worst storm I had ever been in. There was no way, you couldn't even stand up. It was all I could do to stake out my tent as tight as I could, get in and just wait it out, because there was just nothing else I could do. And here I am just finishing the walk. This is before, it was even after this, the storm was even worse than this. So I get back to Reykjavik, and I was talking to this guy, and he said, "Hey, JR, how was your trip?" I said, "Oh, it was great, but man, about 5 or 6 days ago, there was this unbelievable storm. I never saw anything like it." He goes, "Oh, that was a Category 5 hurricane." Category 5? He says, "Yeah, it's a Category 5 hurricane. This is a hurricane called Hurricane Katrina. And this is the hurricane that destroyed New Orleans." I said, New Orleans is destroyed? He goes, yeah, oh man, it's underwater, it's flooded, it's really bad. What happened was, after that hurricane devastated New Orleans, it continued up the east coast of the US, you might remember, and then it veered out into the North Atlantic, where it picked up strength all over again, became a Category 5, and smashed into Iceland right in the middle of my trip. So what's the lesson learned? The lesson to me is, there are some things that we're just not bigger than. There are some things that take precedence over us. One of them is weather. And when you get stuck in weather, it doesn't matter what you have to do. It doesn't matter where you have to be. It doesn't matter who you are. Weather doesn't care. And in a way, I feel that there's a certain lesson in humility there. Like you're not really all that, because weather will destroy you, in a moment. And I guess that's the lesson that I learned. And it's a lesson that you bring back home, just like a lot of these lessons that you learn in the wilderness, you can bring back home. So one of them is weather. You just have to roll with it. You have to just be patient, and it teaches you, I think, a little lesson in humility that no matter how well you plan or who you are, you have to just go with whatever you're given. So let's go down to number 4 now, wildlife. People say, well, do you ever see stuff out there? What do you see? And all that. I love to see wildlife in the wild, in the natural habitat that it was meant to be in. I believe we live in a shared planet, and that we should share it with the wildlife. Many years ago, before this, back in 1980, actually. So I was up in the Yukon, and I met this Native American up there. Well, actually, they call them First Nations people in Canada. And I was telling him how much I'd love to see wildlife when I'm out there. And he says to me, listen, man, you want to see wildlife? I'm going to tell you how to see wildlife. Because you're from New York and you don't know nothing about wildlife. I said, thanks a lot. He said, I can do it in 3 words. It's sit, watch, and learn. So he goes on to say that when you're walking through the wilderness, all the animals that are out there, they're going to know that you're coming. They're either going to see you, smell you, whatever. And what typically happens is that they just kind of move aside and let you go through. And then after you go through, they're going to come back and they're going to do whatever they were doing before you got there. But if you go in there and you find yourself a nice, comfortable place to sit down, and you keep quiet, and you're very patient, and you just wait, these animals, they're going to see you, and they're going to know that you're not a threat. And sooner or later, gradually, they're going to come back, and they're going to start doing what they were doing before you got there, even though you're still there. And so I tried it. And sure enough, it works out pretty well. What happens, usually the first things that come back are the birds. And when you see the birds coming back, you know that the animals are kind of getting used to you. Then the next thing you see are usually the small animals, the squirrels, the chipmunks, pikers, whatever there are. And then if you're patient enough and you wait long enough, you'll begin to see the bigger mammals that are all coming back. And you can sit there, you can watch them. If you're very careful and very easy and very slow, you can take photos. And you can see all the wildlife you want if you just sit, watch, and learn. And it was, to me, one of the most profound things that I've learned being out there, because I do love to see wildlife again in its habitat the way it's supposed to be living. So from 1980 to present, caribou in northern Alaska. These are musk oxen in a trip I took in Greenland. There's my tent right here. This is in Tanzania, thousands and thousands of animals, within easy distance on the Mikumi National Park. And this is in the jungle in Costa Rica. It's a python. And of course, in Australia, the koala bear. And so you can actually see these animals really great when you're just patient and you kind of put yourself in their environment, put yourself in their world, and just wait for them to come out and you can see it. And even when you don't see them, it's nice to see what these animals are doing out there. This was one of the best beaver dams I've ever seen. This water right here is really a rather large lake and it's holding back. It's about a 2 or 3 foot difference here in these two water levels. So whatever beavers did this, they must have had a degree in engineering, that's for sure. They did a really good job. So it's even nice to see that. And then of course, when you wake up at 15 feet from your tent, you see these giant grizzly tracks. And then you realize that you're not at the top of the food chain. You can take all the macho photos you want, but grizzlies don't care either. They're like the weather. So yeah, if you want to, if you want to see some wildlife, I think the idea is just to be patient and recognize that they're going to live their life. They're going to be skeptical of you, but if you're patient enough and you sit around there long enough and you're quiet, you can see them. So, we're down to number 3, being alone. I guess I get this question more than any other one, because most of my trips are alone. I've done more than 50 trips that are 2 weeks or longer. And the vast majority of them all around the world have been alone. So I'm not antisocial, I'm not misanthropic, I'm not a hermit. The trips that I've done with friends have all been great. But for me personally, I like to be by myself. I like the idea of a living where I have to make all the decisions. And what I like about it is what I learn about myself, where you have nobody else to talk it over with, nobody to discuss it with. If you make a mistake, it's your mistake. And so let's go here to Northwest Territories. Back in 1997, I went up here to do this Canol trail. It's 233 miles. That got me to the first food drop. That week got me to the second food drop. And then that week got me back, all the way back. So, this is the airstrip here where he dropped me off. Nobody is there. It's just straight down the tundra, right here on the border. And there's Perry's heading back to Norman Wells after dropping me off. When you see that plane go by, that's when you know you are alone. That's when I knew I was alone. He was going to be back home for dinner. It's going to take me 3 weeks to get that dinner. But it was all good because, let me tell you, this country is just beautiful up here. It's primitive, it's pristine, it's just the way it was 1,000 years ago. And it was just great country just to be alone. This is just to show you about alone and being out in a remote area. This is where I was camped on the night of August 31st, 1997. This was the day that Princess Diana of Britain was in an auto accident in Paris and unfortunately got killed. And if you remember then, there was a huge media, there was a big funeral, Elton John wrote a song about it. It was incredible. I didn't find out about it until I got back to Norman Wells 10 days later. And somebody said to me, with all of the press coverage that this accident and what happened after that, with all the press coverage that it got, you're probably one of the few people left on the planet who until this moment didn't know that this accident happened. And so it's alone. I think I have a little something that I wrote in a book about being alone. So, going solo is the ultimate detachment. It provides an unusual opportunity to get more in touch with myself, and it makes me more intensely aware of my surroundings. I can actually feel my senses becoming keener to the point where I see things more fully than if I had been part of a group. What I especially like is not having to compromise on anything. I go where I want, when I want, at whatever pace I want. I eat when I'm hungry, I rest when I'm tired. I don't have to appease, consult, or agree with anybody. My life is all mine for duration. There have been trips that I could have finished a day or two earlier, but I chose to stay on the fringe of civilization a little longer and not be tempted to reconnect by the lure of a hot shower, a fresh change of clothes, or dinner that doesn't come pre-cooked in a foil bag. There's a difference between aloneness and loneliness. I have never been lonely when alone in the wild. Obviously, it's a risky business, but it makes you more resourceful and self-reliant. And these are benefits that you bring back home. Nevertheless, as much as I enjoy it, I have never advised anyone to go out there alone. If you question whether it's a smart thing for you to do, it probably isn't. So again, it's not for everybody, but there's a certain self-learning that you get, not to mention the adventure of it. So for people who like to do it, you know what it's like. For other people, you know, it's fine. Number 2, are you ever scared? People like to know, you know, I get asked this a lot. Are you ever afraid? I have been scared so many times that I consider myself an expert at fear. Right? If there was a PhD for fear, I'd be Dr. Scared. You know, I've been scared so many times. I could tell you different types of fear. You know, what you learn from fear, all kinds of things from fear. And I'll take you with me up to Baffin Island back in the day, because on this particular trip, a number of scary things happened. The first thing was I had this feeling, this sense that I was being stalked by a polar bear. I had no weapon, I had no nothing, and there were polar bears around there because I had seen them. And I just couldn't shake that fear. Then a few days later, I stepped in some quicksand. And when I realized that I was stuck, I was able to lunge out and crawl away. And then a few days after that, I had to cross this big canyon on a rusty, there was a cable I went across in a seat, and you got to sit down and pull your way across it. The thing looked like it was set up like in 1832. And I was sure that this thing was not going to work, and I was going to, so it was a scary thing all the way through. But let me take you through it here. Back in the day, Northwest Territories, I love the license plate, the polar bear shaped license plate. This area is no longer Northwest Territories. That's how long ago this was. This territory is now called Nunavut. This is the area that the Canadian government gave back to the native Inuit or Eskimo people. Baffin Island. Baffin Island, most people haven't heard of it either, although it's the 6th largest island in the world. It's up in northern Canada, most of it above the Arctic Circle, and it's between, and it's opposite Greenland. So Greenland, the water's called the, there's water in between. And then there's Baffin Island on the other side. Davis Strait, that's the name of the water. So I was up here, and so yeah, you land on a small island away from Baffin Island, because that part of Baffin Island, nobody lives there. And then you have to find a native family to take you in a boat to actual Baffin Island, to the shore, and then I was going to walk across to the other side. So while I'm in the boat, this is what I'm greeted with. There was, in this year, it had been a very cold previous winter, and it didn't warm up that much in the summer, and so the icebergs did not melt, even though I was there in September. And because the icebergs are still there, the bears are still there, and the seals were always there, and so this was a worry. They were even worried about it coming into the town there where I landed. So I was a little sketchy right from the start. So the boat drops me off here, and they tell me, walking across, if you can make 10 miles, you'll be okay. because polar bears like to eat seals, and so they're not going to go too far away from the water. So then maybe they'll follow you 10 miles, but once you get there, you don't have to worry about it. I'm like walking, nothing there, so I walk a little further, nothing there. And I can see all the way back. I could see there's nothing there, but I couldn't help. I was so scared that I would turn around and there would be a bear there. And that's the kind of fear where it's in your mind. There was nothing there that was threatening me, but I was certain that at any minute, I was going to be lunch. And then, as I said a few days later, I was walking through this valley, and it was all muddy, and I stepped in, and I couldn't get my leg out. And then the more I pulled this one out, the more this one sunk in. So I just, without thinking, I just threw myself off, and I was able to grab something and pull myself out. But then when I got out, and I'm lying on the ground, then I got scared. Then my heart started pounding. So this is like a delayed fear. This is when I didn't have time to be afraid. So it wasn't until I got out, and it was like, I came so close that I got scared, And if I had to explain it, after all these trips from the 1960s, I could do it in one word. That one word would be gratitude. Because I'm grateful that I was able to do it. I'm grateful that I'm still doing it. I'm grateful for all the places that I've been, all the people that I met, all the things that I've seen, everything that I've done. It's really been it's been a hell of a ride all these times, and you learn so much about yourself when you're out there. And that's why I'm just happy that it all worked out the way it is, that I'm still able to do it now, although I'm 76. And hopefully, keep on doing it. So, 1966, I'm here in Yukon. I drove to Alaska here when there were only 13 people living in Alaska. And 1980, this is in the Adirondacks. When we went to Rocket Lake, canoe trip. Who has cowboy boots? That's in New York too, right? Nobody has cowboy boots. Wow. And then, 10 more years later, in 1991, there's so many people have taken their photos right next to the sign right here. And here I am in Glacier Park in 1998. And in Finland, this is the highest, the top of the highest mountain in Finland, also north of the Arctic Circle, a place called Auyuittuq in Finnish Lapland. I did a solo trip here as well. And just a couple of years ago in the Dolomites, when I did this, and the thing about all these trips and all the other photos that I have, almost every trip you see of me, or every picture you see of me, I've got a smile on my face. And I have a smile on my face because I really love doing this. I've always loved doing it. And I'm grateful that I had a chance to do it. So, let me just summarize here and tell you the kind of 5 things that I've learned in all the years that I've been doing this. Now, I'm going to say 2 things about it first. Number one, these 5 things. Number one is I learned more than 5 things. But so these are kind of the 5 that maybe grab me the most or that most top of mind. And the other thing is that these things that I've learned, you don't have to go into the wilderness to learn them. So we probably all learned them at some point or at some place in time. But to me, these are the things that kind of stand out. First one being, stay curious. I learned to stay curious, cultivate that inquisitive mind, embrace the opportunity to learn, because curiosity opens the door to knowledge and experience. Number 2, expand your comfort zone. I learned to tolerate uncertainty, try new methods and techniques, being prepared to adjust. And I believe it helps you grow as a person when you can see what it's like in situations that you're not totally comfortable with. There's learning there. I learned to trust my instincts, to believe in yourself and experience that makes you a more confident person. Also to diversify, to broaden my scope and horizon, do something that's different from the outdoors. I think it is counterintuitive. As much as I love backpacking, I think it's also important to do other things that are not backpacking, so that when you go backpacking, you really appreciate it in a deeper way, in a more profound way. And so, yeah, it's one thing that I do, it's one thing I love, but don't just do that, do other things as well. And keep your perspective. I love to backpack, I love to be in the wilderness, but hey, I'm not finding world peace. I'm not finding a cure for HIV or anything like that. I'm just a backpacker, putting one foot in front of the other. And I like to make sure I keep that in its place. As important as it is to me, there are things that are more important, your family, your friends. And so I think that, just try to keep it all into perspective. And so I want to end it up here by saying this. The wilderness can be a harsh place. It can be a tragic place. But the wilderness is also a fragile place, and it's a place that needs to be protected. And in order to protect it, you have to appreciate it. And in order to appreciate it, you really need to experience it. And so the more people that we can get to get outdoors and at their own pace and in their own way to experience all the benefits that nature can provide, I think we're all going to be a lot better. And I know AMC is all over that, and I know all of you believe that. And so I'm hoping that when I give talks like this or a book or whatever, that I can motivate people to get out there and experience what it's like and all the benefits that are that you can accrue from being just in the outdoors any way that you want to do it. So thanks again for coming down. I appreciate you being here. Thank you.